Welcome back to The Dip Dive. I'm really thrilled you could join us again as we embark on another journey. Today, we're diving into a book that, well, it truly lives up to its title. It's one that many creatives, entrepreneurs, and honestly just anyone trying to do something meaningful often consider a foundational text, a real wake-up call.
Oh, absolutely.
It's short, sharp, and often feels less like reading a book and more like, a direct conversation with your own inner saboteur.
Indeed. We're talking about Steven Pressfield's The War of Art, Winning the Inner Creative Battle. And you're right, it's remarkably compact, but wow, profoundly impactful.
Yeah.
It's often described as that essential kick in the pants that maybe every aspiring individual needs to actually begin. It tackles this universal adversary, one that kind of lurks within all of us, persistently stopping us from doing what we feel we were, well, truly meant to do.
And Pressfield himself, he's quite the figure, a veteran novelist known for these epic historical novels like Gates of Fire, Tides of War.
That's right. Really intense stuff. And also commercial success with The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Right. And his background, it's in military history, classical narratives. It gives his advice on creativity, this, strategic, disciplined rigor. You don't often find that in, say, typical self-help books.
No, you really don't. It's a different flavor entirely. It feels earned somehow.
And it's not just us saying this. Robert McKee, the legendary screenwriting guru, his works influenced generations of filmmakers.
Oh yeah, McKee's story is practically required reading.
Exactly. Well, he wrote the foreword for The War of Art, and he openly admits to having held Olympic records for procrastination. Can you believe that?
Oh, I can actually. It's strangely comforting.
Isn't it? He even said he procrastinated about his procrastination problem. He describes reading Pressfield's book as this huge personal revelation, not just intellectually, but deep down.
He said it offered him a battle plan, didn't he? And a vision of victory against this insidious internal enemy.
Yeah, and it really speaks volumes about Pressfield's discipline and insight that his historical novels are apparently assigned reading at Oxford.
Wow, Oxford.
Yeah, allowing students to, quote, rub shoulders with life in classical Greece. I mean, if that doesn't highlight the weight of his insights, I don't know what does.
That's pretty serious validation.
Yeah.
So, okay, our mission for this deep dive then is to really explore the War of Art's content thoroughly.
Let's do it.
We'll try to go, chapter by chapter, really uncover the core concepts, discuss the surprisingly deep implications under that straightforward prose, and maybe even touch upon where, alternative viewpoints might come in, or how some of Pressfield's strong statements land today.
Yeah, see how they hold up.
Exactly. We'll look at how all these ideas connect, build a full picture, and most importantly, offer practical ways you can use this, ensuring you walk away not just informed, but genuinely ready to apply these insights to your own war.
That sounds like a vital mission, honestly, for anyone trying to navigate their creative path or maybe start a business or really just do something hard.
It applies broadly, for sure.
So we'll start by defining this elusive adversary Pressfield paints so vividly. Then we'll shift focus to the combat strategy he lays out, what he calls turning pro.
Okay.
And finally, we'll get into what he calls the higher realm, this place where inspiration and our unseen allies seem to live.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's not procrastinate any longer. Seems appropriate, right? Let's begin by defining this adversary, this thing that so often feels like it's holding us back from living our true potential. Okay, let's really try to unpack this first part. Book 1. Pressfield kicks things off by introducing his central, kind of all-encompassing term, resistance, with a capital R.
Right, the capital R is important.
Yeah, and this isn't just, feeling a bit reluctant. He frames it as something way more fundamental, almost like what Freud called the death wish.
Exactly. That destructive force inside human nature that seems to invariably rise up whenever we even consider starting a tough, long-term course of action, especially one that might actually be good for us, or maybe good for others.
And the crucial thing to grasp right from the start is this isn't some external enemy. It's not your boss. It's not the market.
No. It lives deep inside us, all of us. That's what makes it so tricky.
What's really fascinating and maybe a bit scary is how this force actually shows up. Pressfield calls it the root of self-sabotage, self-deception, self-corruption.
Yeah, all the self stuff that gets in our way.
Yeah.
For writers, it's the classic block, right? That paralyzing inertia. And the symptoms can drive even really disciplined people to do, well, frankly, appalling and unproductive things.
Like Robert McKee's example in the foreword. It's so vivid.
Oh, it's brilliant. He says he was blocked as a Calcutta sewer.
Yeah.
What a metaphor.
Seriously.
And what did he do? Did he, try to push through the writing. Nope. He decided to try on all his clothes.
Every single item.
Meticulously sorting them into piles. Not just once, he did it twice.
That's commitment to avoiding work.
Precisely. He realized, looking back, this was resistance in its purest form. Just diverting all that precious creative energy away from the real challenging work into something absurd, time-consuming, feels kind of productive, but achieves absolutely nothing towards the actual goal.
It's so relatable, though, that urge to suddenly clean the entire house when you have a deadline.
Oh, totally. He even points out how seeking support, talking to friends, maybe even a therapist, can, ironically, become another sneaky disguise for resistance.
How so?
Well, it lets you talk about the work, analyze the work, discuss your feelings about the work, instead of just sitting down and, doing the damn work. It feels like progress, but it's just more avoidance.
Wow. Okay, that makes a scary amount of sense. I've definitely felt that pull towards, hyper-organizing or just distracting myself right when I needed to focus the most.
We all have.
And this leads right into another really powerful idea Pressfield introduces, the concept of the unlived life.
Yeah, this one hits hard.
He suggests that most of us are basically living two lives at the same time. There's the one we're actually living day to day.
Right, the reality.
And then there's this deeper, richer, often more authentic, unlived life simmering inside us. And standing right between those two, like a big invisible guard, that's resistance.
Exactly. And he's not talking about vague dreams here. He gets really concrete, gives tangible examples of this unlived life that just resonate.
Like what?
Well, think about that treadmill you bought, now gathering dust in the attic. That's a symbol of an abandoned health goal, right?
Guilty.
Or the diet you started, full of enthusiasm, then just fizzled out.
Yeah.
The spiritual practice you genuinely wanted to cultivate but never quite committed to, that business idea you were so excited about but never actually launched.
Oof. Yeah.
Or maybe the most painful one, that core calling you feel deep down but never pursue. The writer who doesn't write, the painter who doesn't paint, the musician whose instrument just sits there, silent.
It's the stark picture of the person you could be, isn't it? The potential you're not reaching.
Exactly. And Pressfield, he really doesn't mince words here. He calls resistance the most toxic force on the planet.
Oh.
He even goes so far as to say it's the root of more unhappiness than poverty, disease, and erectile dysfunction.
Oh, okay, that's a strong claim.
It is. But his point is that it systematically deforms our spirit. It stops us from accessing and achieving our unique genius, that inner spirit, holy and inviolable, as he calls it, that's trying to guide us toward our true purpose.
And he uses some pretty intense anecdotes to hammer this home. That story about Hitler, it's genuinely chilling.
Yeah, it really is. He notes that Hitler, when he was young, like 18, took his inheritance and moved to Vienna, specifically to study art and architecture. That was his plan.
Right, I'd heard something about that.
But history has basically no record of his paintings, certainly nothing significant. And Pressfield's conclusion is just stark, haunting. He says it was easier for Hitler to start World War II than it was for him to face a blank square of canvas.
My God. That puts it in perspective, the power of resistance.
It shows how profoundly powerful and just utterly destructive it can be when it wins, when we let it win.
It's a really sobering thought, and I guess it's meant to make each of us look inward, right?
Absolutely. It's a prompt for some serious internal reflection. That quiet little voice that's probably, piping up even now as you're listening, telling you about the calling that is uniquely yours. You know what it is, deep down.
Yeah, you do.
Nobody else needs to tell you. And Pressfield throws down this challenge. It's almost confrontational, he says to the reader, to you. And unless I'm crazy, you're no closer to taking action on it than you were yesterday or will be tomorrow. You think resistance isn't real. Resistance will bury you.
Wow. That's blunt.
It is. It's a powerful, almost brutal call to just acknowledge this internal enemy. Stop pretending it's not there or that it's not actively working against your highest good, your potential.
Okay. So, if this force is so pervasive, so destructive, what are its main targets? What are resistance's greatest hits, as Pressfield calls them? What activities usually trigger it?
He gives a really clear and pretty comprehensive list. It includes pursuing any kind of creative art writing, painting, music, film, dance, you name it.
Makes sense. The blank page is scary.
Totally. But also launching any entrepreneurial venture, committing to a new health regimen or diet, starting any program of spiritual advancement, trying to overcome unhealthy habits, addictions, procrastination itself.
So anything that requires effort and change, basically.
Pretty much. Also, education of any kind, performing acts of moral courage, genuinely helping others, making deep commitments of the heart like marriage, having kids, or taking any kind of principled stand that might go against the flow.
Huh. It's a broad range. What's the common thread there?
That's the fascinating part. All those activities, they inherently involve rejecting immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth or better health or deeper integrity. Or, you could put it another way, any act that really comes from our higher nature, our more evolved self, instead of our lower, more instinctual, comfort-seeking self, that's going to trigger resistance.
So resistance wants us to stay comfortable, stagnant.
Exactly. Its core agenda is to prevent us from evolving, from becoming the best versions of ourselves. It wants the easy path, not the path of growth. It fears change.
Understanding the enemy is key in any war, right? So Pressfield meticulously breaks down the characteristics of resistance. He gives us a kind of psychological profile of this internal foe.
Yeah, he does. And it's really helpful. First, and this is maybe the trickiest part, it's invisible.
Right. You can't see it.
Can't see it, can't touch it, can't smell it, but you absolutely feel it, like this invisible repelling energy field, just pushing you away from your work, from your calling.
And second,
it's profoundly internal. This is critical. It doesn't come from your circumstances or other people, though they might become its allies. We'll get to that. Yeah. It arises purely from within us. It's truly the enemy within. Makes it harder to fight because it feels like us.
Yeah, that's the insidious part, which leads to the third point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Third, it's insidious. Oh man, is it insidious. It lies. It fabricates excuses. It deceives. It can take on any form. He calls it protean, like the shape-shifting Greek god. It'll morph to fit any situation.
And tell you exactly what you want to hear to justify not doing the work.
Precisely. Pressfield famously says resistance is always lying and always full of shit. Yeah. It whispers the most convincing, logical-sounding reasons to avoid the work. You're too tired. You need more research. Maybe tomorrow.
Okay, so invisible, internal, insidious. What else?
It's also profoundly implacable. You just cannot reason with it. Think of like the alien or the Terminator or the shark in Jaws.
A relentless, unthinking force.
Exactly. It can't be negotiated with, can't be appeased. It's a pure engine of destruction with one single goal. Stop you from doing your work. Stop you from creating, from growing. You could reduce it to a single cell, he says, and that cell will keep attacking. It's just its nature.
Sounds pretty daunting.
It is, but here's a key distinction.
Yeah.
It's also impersonal. This is important. It's not specifically targeting you personally. It doesn't care about you. It operates with the cold indifference of, like, gravity or rain.
So don't take it personally when you feel it.
Right. Remembering its objective, non-personal nature can actually be quite liberating when you're locked in battle with it. It's not about you. It's about the act of creation or growth itself. It opposes the act, not the person.
Okay, that helps a bit. And then comes this really interesting one, almost paradoxical. It's infallible. How does that work?
Yeah, this was a huge reframe for me, too. It's like a perfectly calibrated compass needle. It unfailingly points to true north, meaning it always points directly to the calling or action that it most desperately wants to stop you from doing.
So, the thing you feel the most resistance towards
is probably the exact thing you need to be doing for your soul's evolution. The more significant the call, the more important the action is to who you're meant to become, the more overwhelming resistance you will feel towards starting it.
Wow, so that feeling of intense fear or dread or just massive reluctance?
It's not a stop sign, a giant flashing neon arrow pointing you precisely in the direction you need to go. You can actually use resistance as your guide. Follow the fear.
That's actually kind of empowering. Okay, what else?
Well, related to that, resistance is universal. Everyone struggles with it. Doesn't matter how talented you are, how experienced your background, you are absolutely not alone in feeling this friction. Everyone you admire has fought this battle.
That's comforting, too. We're all in the same boat.
We are. And it never sleeps. This isn't something you conquer once, and it's gone. Pressfield shares that incredible detail about Henry Fonda, 75 years old, a Broadway legend.
Still throwing up before performances.
Still throwing up every night. The fear doesn't just vanish. The battle is a daily thing. You have to show up and face it every single day.
And it plays for keeps, he says.
Oh, yeah. It plays for keeps. Its ultimate goal isn't just to slow you down or make things difficult. It aims to utterly kill your genius, your unique gift, the contribution only you can make. He frames it as a literal war to the death for your creative soul.
Intense. But then he says it's fueled by fear, our fear.
Paradoxically, yes. Resistance has no inherent power of its own. Every ounce of juice it possesses comes from us, he says. From our fear of it and our fear of the work itself. Fear of failure, fear of success.
We'll get to fear of success later. That's a big one.
Definitely. But the point is, if you can master that fear, stare it down, you start to conquer resistance. Its power source is internal to us.
Okay. And it only opposes in one direction.
Right. This is interesting. It only opposes in one direction.
Yeah.
Pushing you away from a lower sphere towards a higher one. From the realm of ego to the realm of soul, you could say.
So it won't stop you from, like, quitting your dream job to watch TV all day.
Exactly. It won't stop you from quitting noble charity work to become, I don't know, a ruthless telemarketer.
Yeah.
Because that's arguably a descent, not an ascent towards your higher nature. It only fights you when you try to level up.
Got it. Okay, this next one is a crucial warning for anyone on a long project. It's most powerful at the finish line.
Critically important, yes. He uses that great ancient story of Odysseus. Remember, his men thought this sealed bag he had contained gold.
Yeah, they're so close to home, to Ithaca.
So close. And they opened it, thinking they'd get rich quick.
Yeah.
But what was inside? The adverse winds, specifically bottled up by the gods for Odysseus' safe passage home. Opening the bag unleashed them, driving his ships all the way back across the ocean.
Oh man, right when they could practically see home.
Exactly. The message is crystal clear. The danger is greatest, resistance is strongest, precisely when the finish line is in sight. Because resistance senses its defeat is near. It hits the panic button, throws everything it has left at you, self-doubt, sudden crises, distractions.
So you need extra vigilance at the end.
Absolutely. The professional, the artist, the entrepreneur has to be acutely wary and incredibly disciplined right at the very end. Don't fumble on the 1-yard line.
Okay, good tactical advice. And finally, this subtle one. Resistance recruits allies.
Yeah, this is tricky. It's not just the voice inside your own head. Other people close to you, your friends, your family, your partner, might start acting weirdly.
How so?
They might get moody, suddenly get sick, make passive-aggressive comments, maybe even accuse you of changing or becoming selfish just as you're starting to gain momentum.
Why would they do that?
Pressfield argues it's because your budding success, your active confrontation with your resistance, inevitably shines a light on their own unaddressed resistance. It makes them uncomfortable. It implicitly reproaches them for not pursuing their own unlived lives.
Ah, the classic crab in the bucket metaphor.
Precisely. The highest treason a crab can commit is to try and climb out. The other crabs will pull it back down. Pressfield warns the awakening artist, the person turning pro, that they have to be almost ruthless here. Get over the wall and keep motating, as he puts it.
So don't let their resistance pull you back down.
You can't. He insists the best thing one artist can truly do for another is just serve as a living example, an inspiration. Just by doing their own work, facing their own resistance, that's the real support.
Wow. Okay, that's a comprehensive profile of the enemy. Now let's get into the specific ways it shows up, the symptoms, because it's sneaky.
It is. It manifests in countless, often deceptive ways in our daily lives. And the most common, the one we're all probably most familiar with, and maybe the easiest to rationalize away, is procrastination.
Yes. Good old I'll start tomorrow.
Exactly. I'm definitely going to write my symphony. I'm just start tomorrow. The real danger here, the most pernicious aspect, is that procrastination can so easily become a deeply ingrained habit.
Yeah, it becomes the default.
Right. And you end up effectively putting off your life, your potential, maybe until your deathbed. But Pressfield hits us with this powerful, urgent reminder. Never forget, this very moment, we can change our lives. This second, we can turn the tables on resistance. This second, we can sit down and do our work.
It's that immediate, no waiting.
It's an immediate call to action, right now.
Okay. What else? Resistance can show up as sex or other immediate gratifications.
Yes, or an obsessive focus on sex, or really any immediate transient gratification. Think drugs, compulsive shopping, binge-watching TV, endless scrolling, gossip.
Why those things?
Because they all offer a cheap, easy fix, right? A powerful, immediate distraction from the deeper, more challenging, often less immediately rewarding work that truly matters in the long run. He suggests the measure of hollowness you feel afterward is often a dead giveaway. It reveals the true, self-sabotaging motivation behind it. It wasn't really about pleasure. It was about avoidance.
That makes sense. Then there's creating trouble, like actual drama.
Yeah, manufacturing trauma, fostering ill health consciously or unconsciously, or deliberately causing problems just to get attention. This becomes a kind of faux form of fame, he says, which is often way easier to achieve than buckling down and doing the actual difficult creative work.
Like getting arrested versus finishing your dissertation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pressfield's advice here is blunt. The working artist banishes from her world all sources of trouble because they are pure, unadulterated resistance that just drain energy and focus.
And this connects to self-dramatization, too.
It does, where you consciously or unconsciously create this ongoing soap opera in your life, purely to prevent your real work from ever getting done. He jokes that sometimes entire families get in on this act, ensuring that nobody gets a damn thing done when it comes to anyone's true creative pursuits.
Wow. Resistance is a family system.
Yeah. He even jokes about resistance being like an evil twin to Santa Claus, making sure every little perceived need or crisis is meticulously taken care of, precisely so that no actual meaningful work can ever commence. The decks are always being cleared, but never for the main event.
Okay, this next one, self-medication, is where he gets really provocative, right? Challenging common diagnoses.
Extremely provocative. He talks about using substances, alcohol, drugs, even prescription meds sometimes to alleviate depression or anxiety. And then he takes this very strong stance, basically saying attention deficit disorder, seasonal affect disorder, social anxiety disorder. These aren't diseases, they're marketing ploys.
Oh, okay, that's going to ruffle some feathers.
No question. He follows up with, doctors didn't discover them, copywriters did. His argument, which is definitely controversial and not mainstream medical or psychological thinking, is that drugging ourselves, while it might offer temporary relief from the symptoms, fundamentally blocks the soul's deeper call. It numbs the very signals that might be telling us something important about our unlived lives. And, he argues, it ultimately feeds into consumer culture, just perpetuating our cycle of avoidance.
That's a really challenging perspective. It forces you to ask, are we sometimes medicating the symptoms of deep-seated resistance rather than addressing the root cause?
It's a question he wants us to consider, definitely. Whether you agree with his stance on specific diagnoses or not, the underlying point about avoiding deeper issues through temporary fixes is worth thinking about.
Okay. What other forms does it take? He mentions victimhood.
Yes. Where individuals seek gratification, not through honest effort and creation, but through manipulating others, holding them emotionally hostage with their problems or perceived fragility. The condition itself becomes a work of art, he says, a kind of shadow version, a twisted substitute for the real creative act the victim is so desperately avoiding.
That's dark.
It is. And then there's the unconscious choice of a mate, choosing a partner who has, perhaps, already overcome their own resistance, maybe they're successful or driven, and then living vicariously through their achievements.
Instead of facing your own stuff.
Exactly. Pressfield poignantly calls this how resistance disfigures love. Instead of facing our own potential, our own unlived life, we essentially hitchhike on our spouse's journey, never discovering our own power, our own territory.
And he connects this all back to his own experience writing this very book, right?
He does, which makes it so credible. He admits resistance whispered constantly in his ear while writing The War of Art, told him he was a fiction writer, not nonfiction, that exposing these concepts so overtly was just vain, egotistical.
Sounds familiar.
Totally. He seriously considered abandoning the whole project, but he realized he was so unhappy not going ahead. The misery of not doing the work was worse than the fear of doing it. And as soon as he committed, sat down and started writing, the symptoms, the unhappiness, started to lift.
So unhappiness itself can be a major symptom.
Absolutely. That pervasive low-grade misery, that restlessness, that chronic background guilt. He argues this often isn't just life being hard. It is resistance. It's the soul protesting its confinement. And if you don't address it, it can spiral into vices, clinical depression, aggression, even self-destruction. His solution: enact your own internal revolution, metaphorically unplug yourself from the grid of consumer culture, societal expectations, and resistance's lies, and do your work.
It's incredible how many masks resistance wears, but the conversation shifts here, doesn't it? Towards hope, towards strategy. He makes this really compelling, almost counterintuitive point that self-doubt and fear can actually be allies.
Yeah, this is where it starts to turn. He calls them indicators, like gauges on a dashboard. They point directly to what is most important for our soul's growth, our evolution.
So the more fear you feel,
the more scared we are of a work or calling, he says, the more sure we can be that we have to do it. That intense fear, that trembling, that massive reluctance, it's not a sign to back away. It actually signifies profound love for the project and a deep, unconscious recognition of its importance to your soul's journey. The fear is the indicator.
Follow the fear. Okay. What about things like grandiose fantasies or locking yourself away? Can those be resistance too?
They absolutely can be symptoms of avoidance, yes. Fantasizing about success without doing the work, or isolating yourself because you're too sensitive for the world. But he adds a nuance here. He points out that when an artist truly engages deeply with their work, they're never actually alone.
How so?
They're in the book with their characters, or immersed in the painting, or lost in the music. That world can become more vivid and interesting than the so-called real world. The work itself provides this unique companionship, this deep internal connection. It becomes its own world, its own solace. So deep engagement isn't necessarily pathological isolation.
That's an important distinction. Now, he has a really controversial take on healing, doesn't he? Almost a Spartan view.
Very controversial, yeah. He boldly argues that a constant obsessive preoccupation with healing oneself, always trying to fix perceived flaws before starting the work, can itself be a colossal exercise in resistance.
How? It sounds positive.
It sounds positive, but he sees it as a cunning diversion. It siphons precious energy and time away from the actual work you're meant to be doing. He uses the analogy of the athlete. The athlete knows the day will never come when he wakes up pain-free. He has to play hurt.
So don't wait until you're perfectly healed or ready.
Exactly. Pressfield believed that the core creative part of us, our true genius, is already unsullied, uncorrupted, soundproof, waterproof, and bulletproof. It doesn't need fixing. It needs expression. He tells this great personal story, a real turning-a-corner moment for him. He forced himself, despite feeling terrible and full of resistance, to just sit down and write for 2 hours. The writing itself might have been crap. But afterwards, he found this surprising, profound joy and satisfaction in doing a mundane chore washing 10 days' worth of accumulated dishes. What mattered, he realized, wasn't the quality of the writing in that session, but the simple, profound fact that he had actually sat down and done his work. He showed up. That act itself was healing.
The act of doing the work is the healing. Okay, similarly, he's wary of seeking too much external support.
Very wary. He cautions strongly against relying too much on friends and family for validation of your creative endeavors. He calls their praise or encouragement monopoly money.
Monopoly money, why?
Because it's not earned in the real arena. It feels good, but it ultimately weakens us, he argues, by making us dependent on external approval instead of developing internal validation. He even provocatively suggests that workshops can sometimes devolve into colleges of resistance.
Ooh, controversial again. Why?
Because they can become places where people just talk about their art, analyze art, critique art, rather than actually going home and making art. True support, he argues, has to come from within, from that deeper self. He shares his friend Carol's powerful dream.
The Bruce Springsteen dream?
Yeah, where Springsteen, the boss himself, hands her the keys to the bus of her life, the bus driver's seat, and just tells her flat out, shut up and use it.
Ah, love it.
It's about self-empowerment.
Yeah.
Taking the wheel yourself, not waiting for someone else's permission or validation.
Okay. And the final big manifestation, rationalization. Resistance's spin doctor.
It's ultimate right-hand man, as he calls it. This is the sophisticated, intellectual way. Resistance hides our underlying fear. It provides these perfectly plausible, rational justifications for not doing the work.
Like Jeff Goldblum's character in The Big Chill. Have you ever gone a week without a rationalization?
Exactly. And the truly insidious part is that many of these rationalizations are objectively true. Your spouse might genuinely be in late pregnancy. Your day job might indeed have crushing demands. You might be tired.
So they feel valid.
They feel completely valid. But Pressfield throws down this powerful counter-challenge. Tolstoy had 13 kids and wrote War and Peace. Lance Armstrong had cancer and won the Tour de France. He's not dismissing your problems or saying they aren't real. He's saying they are not necessarily insurmountable barriers if your commitment to the work is absolute. The pro finds a way.
Okay, so this really brings us to the ultimate question everyone asks when they face this stuff. Can resistance actually be beaten? Is it possible?
And Pressfield's answer is just unequivocal. Resounding?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely yes. If resistance couldn't be beaten, he states plainly, there would be no Fifth Symphony, no Romeo and Juliet, no Golden Gate Bridge.
All the great works exist despite resistance.
Exactly. He even draws this powerful, visceral parallel to childbirth, something women have been, as he puts it, pulling it off successfully, with support and without, for 50 million years. It's incredibly difficult, it's painful, it requires immense effort, but it is fundamentally possible. Resistance can be overcome.
So if resistance is this formidable, shape-shifting, almost mythical enemy, how? How do we possibly fight it effectively? How do we win this internal war?
The answer, Pressfield says, is remarkably simple in concept, yet profoundly challenging in practice. By turning pro.
Okay, book 2, Turning Pro. This is where Pressfield lays out the core strategy. He introduces this fundamental, almost like epical shift we need to make in our mindset.
Yeah, epical is a good word for it. He literally says turning pro is the dividing line in his life. There was before and there was after.
And it's crucial to understand, right? This isn't primarily about getting paid or getting a publishing deal or a gallery show.
Not primarily, no. It's much deeper than that. It's about adopting a very specific, deeply committed frame of mind. A psychological commitment, first and foremost. It's like a declaration of intent you make to yourself and maybe to the universe.
So what's the core difference he draws between the amateur and the professional?
It's stark. The amateur, he explains, plays for fun, or maybe for ego, for external validation. They work when inspiration strikes, when they feel like it. The professional, on the other hand, plays for keeps, day in, day out, whether they feel like it or not.
The amateur is part-time, the pro is full-time. Mentally, at least.
Mentally, absolutely. Even if they have a day job to pay the bills, their primary psychological commitment is to their calling. He makes this fascinating point about the word amateur coming from the Latin root meaning to love. But he argues the amateur doesn't actually love the game enough. If they truly did, they wouldn't treat it like a casual hobby, something to dabble in when the mood strikes. The professional loves it so profoundly, so intensely, that they dedicate their life to it. They structure their life around it. That's the essence of turning pro.
And resistance hates this.
Oh, resistance hates it when we turn pro. It's the ultimate act of defiance against its power. It's saying, I see you, I feel you, but I'm doing the work anyway.
He uses that great Somerset Maugham quote to illustrate it perfectly.
Ah, yes, the classic. I write only when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp.
Exactly. That, Pressfield says, that is the definition of a pro. Maugham understood a fundamental truth, the mundane, often difficult act of just sitting down and starting the work consistently, day after day. It inevitably sets something mysterious in motion.
Yeah, it creates the conditions for inspiration to show up.
Right. He knew if he built the container, if he showed up reliably for the muse, eventually it would come. It wasn't about passively waiting for inspiration. It was about actively creating the space for it through disciplined action.
So what are the specific qualities? What defines the professional in practice? Pressfield outlines this comprehensive code of conduct, almost like the rules of engagement for this war.
Okay, let's break them down. First, and this seems non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable.
Yeah.
The professional shows up every day, no matter what.
Every day.
Every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Sickness, health, inspired, drained, heartbroken, elated. They get themselves to the workstation. Pressfield, drawing on his Marine background, says they learn how to be miserable.
Huh. An invaluable skill for artists, he says.
Totally, because creation often involves long stretches of discomfort, frustration, or just plain slogging through. You have to tolerate the misery without quitting.
Okay, show up every day. What's second?
Second, they stay on the job all day. Meaning, their body, their focus remains at the wheel for the designated work period. They commit over the long haul each day, resisting that constant siren song of distraction, or quitting early just because it's hard.
Got it. Third,
for the professional, the stakes are high and real. This isn't just a game for them. Often, it involves their literal survival, feeding their family, paying the mortgage, educating their kids. It's not a hobby. It's their lifeblood, their purpose, intertwined with their responsibilities. This raises the stakes considerably compared to the amateur.
Right. That makes sense.
Fourth, they accept remuneration for their labor. They understand their work has value in the world, and they aren't shy about being compensated for it. But, and this is crucial,
They ultimately do it for love.
ultimately, yes. The professionalism, that sometimes cold-blooded exterior they cultivate, is often a necessary compensating device. It prevents them from choking on too much love, too much emotional over-identification with the inevitable ups and downs, the rejections, the criticisms.
So the professionalism protects the love.
In a way, yes. Playing for money, for the pro, produces what he calls the lunch pail mentality. You show up, you punch the clock, you do the work like an infantryman in the trenches, day after day. It grounds the work in reality.
Okay. Fifth quality.
Fifth, they do not over-identify with their jobs. They recognize they're not simply their job description, their successes, or their failures. There's something deeper. The amateur, conversely, is often paralyzed by over-identification, taking every setback, every critique so personally that it completely stifles their ability to function, to take risks, to even put the work out there.
Yeah, that fear of judgment is huge for amateurs.
Sixth, the professional deeply values and relentlessly masters technique. Craftsmanship is paramount. This isn't about being uninspired. It's about building the skills, the vessel, so that when inspiration does arrive, you actually have the ability to capture it, to execute the vision. Technique, he says, is what creates the space for genius to enter by the back door.
You need the how before the what can fully manifest.
Exactly. Seventh, they cultivate a vital sense of humor about the work, and especially about failure. Being able to laugh at yourself, at the absurdity of the process sometimes, is crucial for resilience. It provides necessary detachment.
Keeps you sane. Eighth.
Eighth, they actively receive praise or blame in the real world. They put their work out there. They engage with feedback, even negative feedback. This interaction with the real world, Pressfield argues, is crucial for growth and for anchoring them. He says nothing is as empowering as real-world validation, even if that validation comes in the form of a genuine real-world failure. Which brings us to that amazing story.
Ah, yes, the King Kong Lives story. This really drives the point home about failure.
It really does. It was his first professional screenwriting job, something he'd fought tooth and nail for years to get. And the movie was, well, a disaster.
Understatement. That Variety review quote is brutal.
Oh, it's legendary in its brutality.
Ronald Shusett and Steven Pressfield, we hope these are not their real names, for their parents' sake. Ouch.
Can you imagine reading that about your first big break? No. He said the theater was empty. The film just tanked completely. He was crushed. 42 years old, felt like his life was over, divorced, childless, a total failure after finally getting his shot. Just devastated.
But then his friend Tony Keppelman gave him that crucial advice.
Yeah, Tony, who Pressfield describes as a true pro himself, basically snapped him out of his self-pity. He said essentially, so what? Be happy. You're where you wanted to be, aren't you? You're in the arena, so you're taking a few blows. That's the price you pay for being in the arena and not just sitting on the sidelines criticizing. Stop complaining and be grateful.
Tough love, but profound.
Absolutely. And Pressfield said it was in that exact moment, hearing that he realized he had actually become a pro. Not because he'd succeeded, but because he had experienced a real, undeniable public failure in the professional arena, and he was still standing. That, he realized, is a key distinction. The pro isn't defined by avoiding failure, but by their capacity to endure it, learn from it, and keep going.
That's such a powerful reframe of failure. Okay, so beyond those initial 8 points, there are even more layers to the professional's approach, right? Refining the strategy against resistance.
Yes, definitely. For instance, a professional is inherently patient. Resistance loves to trick amateurs into setting these wildly ambitious, unrealistic deadlines. I'll write my novel in 3 months.
Yeah, setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. Leads to burnout, disillusionment. But the pro understands delayed gratification. They know it's a marathon, not a sprint. They're the ant, not the grasshopper, the tortoise, not the hare. They have this deep, almost innate understanding that any truly significant project will probably take at least twice as long and cost twice as much as you initially hope, and they mentally budget for that. They're in it for the long haul, thinking, I did a ride, not 60-yard dash.
Patience. Got it. What else?
The professional consciously seeks order, both externally and internally. Pressfield tells that story about living in his Chevy van.
Right, having to dig his typewriter out from under a pile of junk just to work.
Yeah. He realized then a true professional cannot operate like that long term. They systematically eliminate chaos from their physical workspace to help banish it from their mind. They want the carpet vacuumed and the threshold swept, he says poetically, so that the muse may enter and not soil her gown. That commitment to external order reflects an internal dedication to the work's sanctity.
Creating a sacred space for the work. I like that. Next.
They also consciously demystify the work. They tend to view it primarily as craft, rather than getting lost in the lofty, potentially paralyzing idea of art with a capital A.
Why? Isn't it art?
It might be, ultimately. But focusing too much on the art aspect can paralyze you with self-importance or fear or just overwhelm. So the pro focuses relentlessly on the how, the technique, the daily practice. They leave the grand what and why to the gods or the muse or inspiration when it strikes. They don't just talk about the art, they do the work, the craft.
Focus on the process, not just the mystical outcome. Makes sense.
And critically, building on the Henry Fonda story, a professional acts in the face of fear. They know deep down that fear never actually goes away completely. There's no such thing as a totally fearless warrior or a dread-free artist. They acknowledge the fear, maybe they still feel like throwing up, but then they clean themselves up, take a deep breath, and they march out and do the work anyway. They know the fear usually recedes once they're actually in the action.
The doing dissolves the fear.
Often, yes, or at least pushes it to the background. Furthermore, the professional accepts no excuses. Not from themselves, not from resistance. They respect resistance too much to fall for its ploys. They know if you give in once, oh, I'll skip today, it'll be twice as easy to skip tomorrow. Pressfield compares resistance to a telemarketer. If you so much as say hello, you're finished.
Huh. So the pro doesn't even pick up the phone.
Doesn't even pick up, just stays at work. They also play it as it lays, meaning they conduct their business, their art, squarely in the real world, accepting that adversity, bad luck, unfairness, and unforeseen obstacles are just part of the game. Remember the Scottish caddie's advice?
Well, you've got to play the wind now, don't you?
Exactly. You deal with the conditions you're given. The field is never perfectly level on Earth, only maybe in heaven. The pro adapts and keeps playing.
Okay. Preparedness is key too, right?
Always prepared. Not just technically skilled, but mentally prepared. Prepared to confront their own self-sabotage when it inevitably arises. Prepared to absorb unexpected blows from the outside world, bad reviews, rejections, market shifts. Prepared to deliver their best effort consistently. The goal isn't necessarily winning every single battle, but handling themselves, their insides, as steadily and resiliently as possible through the whole campaign.
And they don't show off.
Does not show off. For the true pro, style always serves the substance, the material itself. It's never about drawing attention to themselves or their cleverness. The work comes first. And related to that, they are relentlessly dedicating themselves to mastering technique. They have profound respect for their craft. They apprentice themselves, mentally or actually, to the masters who came before them. They know that a strong technical foundation is precisely what creates the freedom for genius, for the muse, to really express itself.
Technique enables genius, doesn't stifle it. Okay. What about asking for help? Does the pro go it alone?
Absolutely not. This is a common misconception. The professional does not hesitate to ask for help. Pressfield points directly to Tiger Woods, arguably the greatest golfer ever, at his peak.
Still worked constantly with a coach, Butch Herman.
Exactly. And apparently reveled in it. Loved the process of learning and refining. True professionals actively seek out the best teachers, mentors, collaborators, editors, whatever they need. And they listen with both ears, hungry to learn, knowing that the levels of mastery are essentially infinite. They aren't afraid to admit they don't know everything.
That's a sign of confidence, not weakness. What about distancing from the instrument?
Yes, the professional distances herself from her instrument, meaning her own physical, mental, emotional self, her ego. He uses the famous example. Madonna employs Madonna.
Huh. Okay, what does that mean?
It means creating a crucial separation between the personal, feeling self and the professional persona or the work itself. This prevents that unhealthy over-identification we talked about. It allows for more objective self-assessment, self-correction, taking criticism less personally. It's essential for sustainable growth and resilience. You are not your work.
And this distance allows them to not take failure or success personally.
Precisely. Having a thick skin isn't about being numb or emotionless. It's about consciously choosing to seat your professional identity, your sense of worth as a creator, somewhere other than your fragile personal ego. Pressfield tells that story about his friend who finished a novel but was literally paralyzed, couldn't send it out because he was so terrified of rejection.
Yeah, the fear was crippling.
The pro understands that critics, rejections, market responses, they're often just external noise, sometimes even unwitting mouthpieces of resistance trying to amplify your own internal fears. The pro learns to self-validate first and foremost. And they develop the wisdom to recognize envy-driven criticism as the supreme compliment.
Because it means you're actually doing something that matters, something that threatens other people's resistance.
Exactly. It's a sign you're on the right track, making an impact.
Okay. They also endure adversity.
Consistently endures adversity. Humiliation, rejection, setbacks. These are often just external reflections of the internal battle with resistance made manifest. Pressfield shares that mortifying story about meeting a big Hollywood producer who had completely forgotten who he was even after hiring him.
Ouch. Total humiliation.
Right. But the pro, he says, just metaphorically, lets the bird shit splash down on his slicker and keeps moving forward. Focuses on the donut, not the hole. They know deep down it's always better to be in the arena getting stomped by the bull than to be up in the stands merely criticizing. That Dewey's PD license plate he mentions, dues paid, becomes a badge of honor, signifying they've been through the wars and survived.
That Tiger Woods story about the camera flash really captures this resilience, too.
Oh, it's iconic. 2001 Masters. Someone snaps a camera flash right at the absolute peak of Tiger's backswing, a moment of pure concentration that would shatter most golfers, make them furious, totally ruin the shot, maybe the round.
Yeah, unthinkable at that level.
But what does Tiger do? Incredibly, he pulls up, stops his swing instantly, takes maybe a second or two to recompose himself, completely calm, and then just steps back up and absolutely stripes the ball 310 yards down the middle.
Unbelievable focus and control.
It's an astonishing display of professional mindset. That ability to control your reaction, govern your emotions, and crucially, not take it personally. He didn't let that external disruption dictate his internal state or his performance. The pro simply cannot allow the actions or mistakes of others to define their reality. They stay in control of themselves and just keep working.
Wow. Okay, a few more qualities. Recognizing limitations.
Yeah, the pro recognizes limitations. They know they can't be experts at everything, so they pragmatically hire agents, lawyers, accountants, collaborators, whatever they need. They focus their energy on being a pro at their one thing, their core craft, and delegate the rest.
And they're willing to reinvent themselves.
Willing to reinvent themselves. As Goldie Hawn apparently said about the stages of an actress's career in Hollywood, Babe, D.A., and Driving Miss Daisy, the muse might have more than one assignment for us over a lifetime. The professional has the courage, when the time comes, to shuck their outworn body for a new one, to pivot, to learn new skills, to embrace the next chapter of their creative journey.
Adaptability is key. And finally, this subtle one. They recognize each other.
Yeah, finally, and this is subtle but powerful. A professional is almost always recognized by other professionals. Like Alan Ladd and Jack Palance sizing each other up in the movie Shane, Pressfield says, a gun recognizes another gun. There's this unspoken understanding, this mutual respect among those who genuinely show up every day, do the hard work, face resistance, and endure. They know who the real players are.
Okay, that's a really comprehensive picture of the professional mindset. So how can someone listening right now start applying this? He suggests you, Inc., right?
Yes. This is a wonderfully practical, metaphorical tool he learned from screenwriters in Hollywood who literally formed their own corporations, loan-outs of themselves.
It's more than just taxes, right? It's a psychological shift.
Well, much more. The psychological benefit is huge. When you metaphorically incorporate yourself, think of yourself as you, Inc., it creates this crucial, healthy distance. Distance between your sensitive, easily bruised personal ego and the demanding, often impersonal nature of the work and the marketplace.
How does that help specifically?
Well, you become less subjective about your own output. You can literally think, okay, you, Inc., needs to deliver this project. You can metaphorically hire yourself and fire yourself. You can price your wares more realistically based on market value, not just personal feeling. You can deal with criticism or rejection. More impersonally, it's directed at the company, not at your soul.
So you, the boss, can manage you, the artist.
Exactly. You, the boss, suddenly has the necessary objectivity to maybe take you, the writer, down a peg when their ego gets inflated, or to provide firm, unbiased direction when you, the painter, is floundering. It's like setting up a structured, internal management system. He even suggests having Monday morning status meetings with yourself, assigning tasks, reviewing progress, using imaginary corporate stationery. It's a mental framework that reinforces that professional commitment day in, day out. It externalizes. Resistance makes it like a difficult employee you can manage or fire, not an internal critic you have to constantly appease.
That's actually a really useful mental model. Okay, so ultimately, why does this radical act of turning pro work so effectively against resistance? What's the mechanism?
Pressfield's answer is beautifully simple and direct. Because resistance, at its core, is a bully.
A bully.
Yeah. And what do we know about bullies? Their power comes almost entirely from the fear they inspire in their victims. Our fear of resistance, our fear of the work, that's what fuels it.
And bullies tend to back down when confronted.
Exactly. A bully often folds when someone finally stands up to them with unwavering resolve. Turning pro is that act of standing up day after day, saying, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm doing this anyway.
So professionalism is about focus and action.
Unwavering focus and resolute action. He brings in the ancient Spartans. They apparently regarded their enemy as nameless and faceless. They believed if they just did their job, trained, fought with absolute discipline and courage, no external force could ultimately stand against them. Their focus was internal, on their own execution.
Like John Wayne and the Searchers.
Right. Ethan Edwards talking about the relentless war chief, Scar. Seems he never learns there's such a thing as a critter that might just keep coming on. The pro is that critter. They just keep coming on. Relentlessly, beating resistance through sheer, indefatigable resolution and consistency.
There's no magic bullet then.
No magic bullet. No secret trick. Turning pro is simply a decision, an act of pure, unadulterated will, renewed every single day.
Okay. But this commitment, this daily grind, this turning pro, it's not just about discipline, is it? He says it unlocks something deeper.
Exactly. It's the essential key, he argues, that unlocks something far more profound, something truly mysterious and, well, transcendent. It leads us directly into what he calls, in Book 3, the higher realm.
Okay. Book 3, the higher realm. This is where Pressfield really takes us beyond the internal battlefield of the ego and the practical strategies of professionalism. He starts talking about forces that are counterpoised against resistance, our allies.
Yeah, unseen allies, angels, muses. This is where the discussion moves, for many readers, beyond straightforward psychology into something more overtly spiritual, maybe even mystical.
He seems to hold a pretty firm belief in the actual existence of muses and angels as the ultimate source of true creativity and inspiration.
He definitely does, which is interesting to contrast with Robert McKee's view in the foreword. McKee acknowledges the effect of inspiration, those incredible moments when ideas just arrive fully formed.
Yeah, where does that come from?
Right. But McKee tends to attribute the cause more to, say, genetic talent or the workings of the deep unconscious mind. He's a bit more grounded in psychology and biology.
But they both agree on the phenomenon itself.
Oh, absolutely. Both Pressfield and McKee emphatically agree on the astonishing experience of inspiration. Those stunning images, profound insights, elegant solutions that seem to just materialize out of nowhere, often when you least expect it. For Pressfield, though, this phenomenon points unmistakably towards the reality of a higher realm, a source outside our individual minds.
And this, for me, ties back directly to why the seemingly mundane, often tedious act of working daily is so fundamentally important.
Yes, Pressfield states it unequivocally. The most important thing about art is to work. Just show up and do it. Because, he argues, when we consistently show up, when we sit down and engage in that often unglamorous daily grind, something mysterious starts to happen. A process is set into motion, he says, by which, inevitably and infallibly, heaven comes to our aid. It's almost like our consistent effort, our sheer focused willpower, starts to act like a beacon or a magnet. It concentrates power around us.
The muse takes note.
The muse or angels or the collective unconscious, whatever term resonates with you, that guiding force takes note of our dedication. We become, as he puts it, like a magnetized rod that attracts iron filings. Ideas come. Insights accrete. Our steady work creates the conditions for grace to enter. It's an almost alchemical process fueled by discipline.
He talks about the ancient wisdom of actually invoking the muse, doesn't he? A practice we've kind of lost.
We really have. He cites Xenophon, the ancient Greek historian and general, whose book Cavalry Commander apparently stated that a commander's first duty, before any battle, was to sacrifice to the gods and formally invoke their aid.
Wow. First duty.
Yeah. And Pressfield reveals he has his own deeply personal ritual for this. Before he starts writing each day, he puts on his lucky items, his old work boots, a specific hooded sweatshirt.
Creates a ritual space.
Exactly. And then he recites the invocation of the muse from Homer's Odyssey. Specifically, the T.E. Lawrence translation, which his friend and mentor Paul Rink gave him years ago. He says he was so immersed in his work during one period, so guided by this ritual and the creative flow it invoked, that he completely missed major historical events happening, like the Watergate scandal unfolding.
Whoa, he was that deep in the zone.
Completely in the zone, facilitated by this invocation.
And he breaks down that invocation line by line, finding really deep meaning in it.
He does. It's fascinating. He points out that starting with, "O divine poesy, goddess, daughter of Zeus," isn't just fancy poetic language. Divine poesy calls upon a force from a holier, transcendent plane. Daughter of Zeus invokes divine help at the highest, most powerful level, Zeus being the king of the gods.
Okay. And the line sustained for me this song.
Crucially, he notes, this isn't some arrogant demand for brilliance or instant success. It's a humble plea, just asking for simple persistence, the strength to endure the process, to keep going when it gets tough. Just help me keep singing the song.
And this song isn't just for poets.
Not at all. He emphasizes this applies broadly to any creative or entrepreneurial venture, anything you're trying to bring into being, from writing The Brothers Karamazov to your new venture in the plumbing supply business. Divine support, he suggests, is available to all sincere, dedicated efforts.
What about the warning in the invocation, the second crime?
Ah, yes. The warning against destroying for meat the oxen of the most exalted sun. Pressfield interprets this ancient line metaphorically. He sees it as a warning against prostitution, in the broadest sense selling out. Meaning employing the sacred gift, the divine spark of inspiration, for purely profane, materialistic, or ego-driven ends. using your art just to chase fame or money, betraying its deeper purpose. That's the second crime, misusing the gift once you've received it.
And the artist's ultimate wish: make this tale live.
Live for us in all its many bearings, O Muse. It's simply the wish to make the work truly live in the world, to give dimension, integrity, resonance from all angles and perspectives, to make it true.
He tells that story about finally finishing his first novel after years of struggle.
Yeah, 26 months of intense, grueling work. And when he finally typed the last word, he said, "Nobody knew I was done. Nobody cared, but I knew." It was this incredibly profound, purely internal victory. He felt like this dragon I'd been fighting all my life had just dropped dead at my feet.
Wow, what a feeling that must have been.
Incredible. But then, when he finally calls his mentor, Paul Rink, to share the news, Rink's response is just perfectly pragmatic, perfectly professional. He just says, "Good for you. Start the next one today."
No resting on laurels.
None. It underscores that professional mindset. Constant, relentless engagement with the muse, with the work. Don't let a single victory, however hard one, breed complacency. The war continues.
This leads right into the magic of making a start, doesn't it? And the magic of keeping going.
Seamlessly. He quotes that famous, powerful couplet often attributed to Goethe. "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, magic, and power in it. Begin it now."
Such great lines.
Aren't they? He also brings in W.H. Murray's related quote from the Scottish Himalayan expedition about how the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of unforeseen incidents, meetings, material assistance start to occur, things that would never have happened otherwise.
So the act of committing, of starting, actually attracts help.
That's the idea. Pressfield suggests that when we finally dare to begin, even with just one small, hesitant step, it's like a crack appears in the membrane between our world and that higher realm. And suddenly, angel midwives congregate around us, actively assisting us in giving birth, not just to the work, but to ourselves, to the person we were always meant to be. It becomes a kind of cosmic collaboration.
That's a beautiful image. Angel midwives. It reminds me of that Wim Wenders movie, Wings of Desire.
Oh, yeah, with the angels listening in on people's thoughts.
Right, and he connects it to the Kabbalah's idea of angels literally crying out, "Grow, grow," when they witness untapped human potential. Pressfield suggests that when we finally begin, we essentially get out of our own way. We clear the path and allow these unseen forces, these higher intelligences, to come in and do their part, guiding and supporting our part.
And the magic of keeping going, he argues, is just as miraculous, though maybe less dramatic. It's about that continuous process of self-revision, self-correction, the little nudges and insights that come during the work. He talks about ideas or solutions suddenly appearing to him while he's out for a walk, effortlessly organizing his material as if some external intelligence were sorting it out.
Like taking dictation sometimes.
Exactly. He genuinely believes an intelligence smarter than we are is always at work when we're engaged, helping organize the chaos, steering us back when we go off course, offering solutions we wouldn't have thought of consciously. It's why, he suggests, so many truly great artists retain this profound sense of modesty. They know deep down they're not doing the work, they're just taking dictation. They are conduits as much as creators.
And he argues this isn't just for creative people.
No, he directly challenges that idea, that false dichotomy. He says powerfully, we're all creative, we all have the same psyche. These everyday miracles of intuition, insight, guidance that potentially happening in all our heads all the time, just waiting for us to tune in to access them through committed action.
He shares some incredibly personal stories of this kind of inner guidance, doesn't he? Dreams and visions that really cemented his belief.
He does. They're very powerful. One he calls the Largo dream. This was when he was really struggling, working as a truck driver, feeling totally lost, adrift, self-destructive. He had this vivid dream where he was on a huge aircraft carrier that was stranded, dead in the water, panic everywhere. And the captain turns to him and asks desperately, "What the hell are we going to do, Largo?" And he woke up just electrified.
Because he was Largo.
Because he realized he was Largo. Largo, the tough, competent, no-nonsense sergeant who actually knew how to run the show, how to take charge, how to get things done. The profound realization wasn't just the name. It was that the power to take charge of his own life wasn't external. It wasn't going to come from someone else. It resided entirely within him. He just had to step up and be Largo.
Wow, that's a life-changing dream. What about the eagle dream?
Another incredibly profound experience. This happened during a deep meditation session. He had this vision or experience of an eagle merging with him, becoming him. And through this, he received this powerful lesson, almost a direct transmission. Things that you think are nothing, as weightless as air, are actually powerful, substantial forces, as real and as solid as Earth.
What kind of things?
He specifically mentions dreams, visions, meditations themselves. He described feeling the undeniable solidness of the air beneath his wings while flying as the eagle. It gave him this deep experiential understanding that these internal states, these seemingly ephemeral things, are just as real, just as solid, just as powerful as anything in our physical waking reality. These direct, visceral experiences really solidified his belief in that unseen intelligence, that higher realm guiding and supporting him.
Okay. Now let's loop back to the unlived life concept we talked about earlier in the context of resistance. Pressfield introduces a really profound and maybe quite controversial idea here, connecting it directly to our physical health, even disease.
Yeah, this is where he pushes the boundaries quite significantly. He references Tom Laughlin, the actor who played Billy Jack, who later started a foundation exploring alternative cancer therapies. And Laughlin apparently suggested this provocative idea,
Which was,
is it possible, Pressfield quotes or paraphrases, that the disease itself evolved as a consequence of actions taken or not taken in our lives? Could our unlived lives have exacted their vengeance upon us in the form of cancer?
whoa, that's heavy. Linking unfulfilled potential to actual physical disease.
Extremely heavy. And potentially problematic if taken too literally or prescriptively, obviously. He's not presenting it as established medical fact, and neither should we. But he poses it as a profound philosophical or spiritual question. And conversely, he asks, could curing oneself sometimes involve actively living those unlived lives out? Finally writing the book, starting the business, pursuing the calling.
So engaging with your true purpose as a form of healing.
That's the provocative implication. Again, it's not medical advice, but it dramatically underlines the immense, almost existential stakes involved in engaging with our calling versus letting resistance dominate. It suggests this deep, maybe mysterious, holistic connection between our inner purpose, our spiritual alignment, and our overall physical and mental state. It raises the stakes of the war of art even higher.
Yeah, it certainly does. This leads us naturally into another core dynamic he explores in this section, the battle between ego and self.
Right. He outlines these two fundamentally opposing belief systems that are constantly operating within us, almost like two different operating systems in our psyche.
Okay, so what defines the ego according to Pressfield?
The ego, he explains, is the part of us that fundamentally believes death is real and final, that time and space are solid, objective realities, that individuals are separate, distinct entities, and that the primary impulse of life is self-preservation. The ego, in his framework, believes there is no God, no higher power, just the material world.
Sounds like a pretty standard, maybe cynical worldview.
Yeah, and he acknowledges these are, in a sense, sound, solid principles for navigating the immediate challenges of physical survival in the material world. It's the OS for getting through the day-to-day.
Okay. And in contrast, the self, with a capital S.
The self represents a completely different belief system. The self believes death is an illusion, merely a transition, that time and space are also ultimately illusions, constructs of consciousness, that all beings are fundamentally interconnected, part of one unified whole, that the supreme emotion is unconditional love, and that God is all there is it believes in, and is connected to what he calls the divine ground, the ultimate source of infinite wisdom and consciousness.
So the ego is about separation and survival. The self is about unity and potential.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The ego is our survival mechanism, rooted in the physical. The self is our connection to divine potential, rooted in the spiritual or transcendent.
How do we access this self, then, if the ego is usually running the show?
Pressfield argues we access the self primarily by demolishing the ego, or at least temporarily quieting it down. This can happen in various ways, some may be less advisable than others. Well, he notes, interestingly, that slang terms for intoxication, like getting stoned or smashed, literally refer to the ego getting temporarily blasted or knocked offline, allowing the self, that deeper awareness, to emerge for a while.
Never thought of it that way.
Right. But more constructively, he says, it happens through practices like deep meditation, through profound dreams that bypass the ego's censor, or in those sudden, overwhelming moments of insight, ideas, and visions, the aha moments that seem to come from beyond our rational mind.
And the ego hates this, hates artists and visionaries.
The ego fundamentally hates artists, prophets, mystics, visionaries, anyone who taps into that self and brings back its wisdom. Why? Because these figures, he argues, propel the race upward. They challenge the status quo. They expand consciousness. They forge the uncreated conscience of our race, as James Joyce put it. This kind of profound evolution, this upward pull towards the self, is perceived by the ego as fundamentally life-threatening to its dominance, its control.
So the ego fights back.
Violently. The ego, Pressfield states, produces resistance and attacks the awakening artist with everything it's got, in a desperate attempt to maintain its perceived control, to keep us locked in the familiar, material, fear-based reality it understands.
This whole dynamic seems to build towards what he calls the master fear. What is that?
Yes. We often talk about our fears, right? Fear of failure, fear of poverty, fear of public speaking, fear of rejection, fear of looking foolish, fear of being selfish or betraying our loved ones.
Yeah, the usual suspects.
Right. But Pressfield insists these are mostly secondary fears, symptoms. They are not the real underlying fear. The master fear, he argues, the one that's so close to us, so fundamental we often don't even recognize it or believe it exists, is the fear that we will succeed.
The fear of succeeding. That sounds completely counterintuitive. Why would we fear success?
Because success, in this context, means succeeding at becoming who we truly are. It's the terrifying prospect that we can actually access our secret powers, our true potential, that we can become the person we're secretly meant to be. And if we do that,
what happens?
we fear we'll become estranged from our familiar life, from our tribe. We fear discovering that we are infinitely more capable, more powerful, maybe more different than we ever allowed ourselves to imagine. And if that's true, the subconscious fears that we'll lose our friends and family, that they won't understand the new us, that we'll wind up alone in the cold void of starry space. It's a deep, primal fear of isolation that comes with true self-actualization, with stepping outside the collective norms.
That's actually quite profound, the fear of outshining, of leaving others behind, of becoming unrecognizable.
Exactly. It's terrifying on a very deep level. But here's the beautiful, paradoxical truth Pressfield offers. We wind up in space, but not alone.
What does he mean?
Instead of being isolated, he says, we become tapped into an unquenchable, undepletable, inexhaustible source of wisdom, consciousness, companionship. We connect with that higher realm, with the self, with like-minded souls on similar paths. Yes, he acknowledges you might lose some old friends who aren't ready for your growth, who are threatened by it. But in return, you find better friends, truer friends, those who resonate with your authentic, emerging self. It's not isolation. It's finding your true tribe, your spiritual family. It's a trade-off, he suggests, that is absolutely worth making for genuine connection and fulfillment.
Treating conformity for authenticity.
Right.
Okay, this connects directly to the idea of the authentic self, doesn't it? The idea that we're not blank slates.
Precisely. He strongly refutes the idea of tabula rasa, that we're born as empty vessels. Instead, he believes we arrive with a highly refined and individuated soul, like an acorn that already contains the blueprint for the mighty oak tree it's destined to become.
So we come preloaded with a destiny.
We come into this world with a specific personal destiny, he explains. We have a job to do, a calling to enact, a self to become. He quotes Wordsworth's beautiful lines from Ode, intimations of immortality. Trailing clouds of glory do we come, from God who is our home. Our fundamental task in life, then, isn't to invent ourselves out of nothing or force ourselves into some externally approved mold. It's simply to find out who we already are and become it.
Discover and enact the blueprint within.
Exactly. If you were inherently born to paint, your job is to paint. If you were truly put on earth to cure cancer or build bridges or teach children, then that is what you must do. It's presented almost as a sacred duty, an imperative woven into the fabric of your being, not just a lifestyle choice or an option.
Okay. Finally, in this section, he introduces these two very distinct ways individuals define themselves and operate in the world. Territory versus hierarchy.
Yes, this is a really practical and insightful distinction. Hierarchy, he explains, is about defining yourself by your rank within a group. Where do you stand on the ladder? Are you above or below others? It's about external approval, status, comparison. And unfortunately, he points out, this is the default mode for most of us, especially because our entire schooling system is basically built on it. Grades, class rankings, popularity contests.
Right. We're trained in hierarchy from day one.
We really are. But the problem, especially for artists or anyone pursuing a unique calling, is that the hierarchical orientation is utterly fatal.
Fatal. Why so strong?
Because if you define yourself by others' opinions, by external validation, for where you rank compared to others, you become paralyzed. You're constantly looking over your shoulder, seeking approval, terrified of judgment. The artist, he insists, cannot look to others to validate his efforts. He uses Van Gogh as a prime example. The guy never sold a single painting in his lifetime. If he'd been operating hierarchically, seeking market validation, he would have quit after the first rejection.
But he kept painting because the drive was internal.
Exactly. Pressfield argues that to labor in the arts, or any true calling, for anything other than the love of the work itself for the internal drive, is essentially prostitution. It's like Odysseus's men destroying the sacred oxen of the sun god just for immediate profane consumption. Neat. It's betraying the sacred trust. The artist stuck in hierarchy is always looking outward, asking, what can this person do for me? How do I rank? What does the audience want? Instead of looking deeply within to their own unique truth, their own territory.
And this is how he defines a hack.
Precisely. A hack, in Pressfield's terms, is a writer, or any creative, who fundamentally second-guesses his audience. They're constantly trying to figure out what the market is looking for, what will sell, what's popular right now, instead of courageously digging deep and expressing what's genuinely in their own heart, what they need to say. The hack writes, paints, composes hierarchically, pandering to a perceived external demand rather than trusting their authentic territorial impulse.
He uses his own experience with the legend of Bagger Vance as the counterexample, right?
A perfect counterexample. He was a struggling screenwriter, desperate for success in hierarchical Hollywood. But the idea for Bagger Vance came to him not as a movie pitch, but as a novel. And even worse, from a hierarchical perspective, it was about golf. A subject he knew had almost zero chance of selling well in the literary fiction market at that time.
So, logically, he should have ignored it.
From a hierarchical, market-driven perspective, absolutely. But he said, the muse had me. I had to do it. He chose to trust what I wanted, not what I thought would work. He followed his internal territorial impulse, despite the apparent lack of external validation or market potential. And what happened?
It became a huge success, both as a book and a movie.
Exactly. It succeeded precisely because he honored his territorial impulse, his authentic vision, rather than trying to game the hierarchy. It perfectly illustrates the power of the territorial orientation.
Okay, so let's define the territorial orientation more clearly. What does it mean to work territorially?
It means the artist, the true creative, the entrepreneur following a vision must learn to operate from their territory. What is territory? It's a psychological home turf. It's claimed, defined, and owned exclusively by the work itself, by the consistent doing of the work.
Can you give some examples?
He uses great ones. Think of the scraggly, three-legged coyote who, despite his disadvantage, absolutely owns the neighborhood garbage cans. That's his territory, claimed through sheer persistence. Arnold Schwarzenegger's territory wasn't the Mr. Olympia stage. That was hierarchy. It was the sweat-soaked floor of Gold's Gym day after day. Stevie Wonder's territory is the piano bench. Pressfield's is his writing desk. It's the physical or mental space where you show up reliably and do your work, regardless of external applause or criticism.
And how does working from territory actually feel different? What are its characteristics?
This is key. First, a territory provides its own sustenance. It doesn't require external input or validation to nourish you. The act of working in your territory is its own reward. He points out that exercise often banishes depression effectively, precisely because it's a pure territorial act. You show up, you do the work, you feel better, regardless of whether anyone is watching or cheering. It's a closed feedback loop.
Okay, what else?
Second, a territory can only be claimed alone. You have to show up and do the work yourself. No one else can do it for you. It requires solitary effort, at least in the claiming phase. Third, and this is crucial, it returns exactly what you put in, infallibly. Every erg of energy you put in goes infallibly into your account. He says, a territory never devalues, a territory never crashes. Your focused effort compounds within your territory, unlike in a hierarchy where external factors, politics, luck can wipe out your gains.
That's really appealing. Reliable return on effort. How can you tell if you're operating territorially or hierarchically? He gives tests, right?
Yeah, two really simple, powerful diagnostic questions. First, if I were feeling really anxious right now, what would my first instinct be? If your immediate thought is, I need to call 6 friends and talk about it, that's likely a hierarchical response seeking external comfort and validation. If your instinct is, I need to head to the gym, or I need to go to my workbench studio desk, like Arnold, that's territorial seeking solace and grounding in the work itself.
Okay, that's clear. What's the second test?
Second question. If I were the last person left on Earth, would I still do this? If your answer is an immediate, unequivocal yes, then it's almost certainly a territorial pursuit. Because if there's no one left to impress, no audience, no market, no critics, no rewards, The only reason left to do it is the inherent satisfaction of the act itself. That's pure territory. The artist, the pro, must learn to cultivate this territorial orientation.
And for artists operating territorially, what's the supreme virtue? Not contempt for death like the Spartans, but
profound contempt for failure. When you're working from your territory, focused entirely on the work itself, on your own thoughts and actions, failure loses its sting. It becomes mere feedback, data, part of the process. By focusing territorially, you cut the earth from beneath the foe, resistance, because its primary leverage is fear of external judgment, hierarchy. This resonates deeply with the Bhagavad Gita's wisdom.
we have a right only to our labor, not to the fruits of our labor.
Exactly. You do the work for its own sake. Or, as Pressfield suggests, you do it as an offering to God, or the muse, or the universe. You become a humble servant of the mystery, simply focused on bringing into existence that which is not yet, trusting the outcome to forces beyond your control.
So in the end, what's Pressfield's portrait of the artist? How does he see them?
He sees the true artist as a servant of that deeper intention, those guiding angels, that insistent muse. The real enemy isn't out there. It's the internal small-time ego that constantly generates resistance. Artists, in this view, are warriors, and through their daily disciplined battle with resistance, they acquire genuine modesty and humility, because they know, deep down, they aren't the ultimate source of their creations. They are merely willing and skilled instruments, through which something larger is seeking expression.
And the ultimate question for each of us
Is profoundly simple, yet utterly challenging. Are you a born writer? Were you put on earth to be a painter, a scientist, an apostle of peace, whatever your unique calling is? In the end, the question can only be answered by action, not by thinking, not by talking, but by doing. And then he delivers that absolutely stunning cosmic imperative.
Yeah, that final challenge is something else.
He says, if you are meant to cure cancer or write a symphony, and you don't do it, you not only hurt yourself, you hurt your children, you hurt me, you hurt the planet.
Wow, the stakes are that high.
He believed they are. He continues, you shame the angels and you spite the Almighty. Why were we given these gifts? For the sole purpose of nudging the human race 1 millimeter farther along its path back to God. Our creative work, our unique contribution, isn't just a personal indulgence, a nice to have. It is, he asserts with incredible force, a sacred gift to the world and potentially a cosmic necessity.
Okay, wow. That is a lot to take in. So after this deep dive into Steven Pressfield's The War of Art, what does this all really mean for you listening right now? What are the core actionable insights you can take away to help win your own inner creative battle?
Yeah, let's try to boil it down. It offers a really clear roadmap.
First, and this seems foundational, you absolutely have to learn to identify resistance in all its sneaky, multifaceted forms. You've got to recognize the procrastination, sure, but also the endless distractions, the self-sabotage, even those seemingly harmless acts like excessive healing or support seeking that subtly pull you away from your actual work, your true calling.
Recognize its lies. See its insidious nature. Understand how it cunningly uses your own fears against you. And then, crucially, flip the script. Use its very presence as that infallible compass we talked about. The stronger the resistance, the more surely it's pointing you toward your true north, toward the work that genuinely matters to your soul's journey.
Right. See it, name it, and use it as a guide. Second, you have to make that powerful, conscious decision to turn pro.
This is the core strategic move.
Yeah.
Commit fully, without reservation. Show up every single day. Every single day. Regardless of how you feel, whether inspiration magically strikes or external circumstances seem impossible, adopt that gritty lunch pail mentality. Show up and do the work.
And part of turning pro is relentlessly mastering your craft.
Right.
And detaching your ego.
Absolutely. Master your technique so you're ready when inspiration hits. And crucially, don't take the inevitable failures or the successes, for that matter, personally. Learn from everything. Detach your ego from the outcome and just keep going. That shift in mindset from amateur to pro, that alone is a massive victory against resistance's power over you.
Okay. Third, connect to something bigger.
Third, make a conscious effort to connect to the higher realm. Understand, or at least be open to the possibility, that inspiration and those unseen allies, muses, angels, intuition, the self, whatever language works for you, are patiently waiting to assist you when you dedicate yourself consistently to the work.
So do the practical stuff and invoke the mystery.
Yes. Do your invocation ritual, whatever that looks like for you. Trust the magic of making a start and the persistent magic of keeping going. Learn to listen to and trust the profound wisdom of your deeper self over the constant chatter and fear-mongering of the ego. This connection opens up an inexhaustible wellspring of creative energy and guidance. You're not alone in this.
And finally, the fourth key takeaway: work territorially.
This is about why and how you work. Do the work for its own inherent sake, for the deep satisfaction the process brings, not primarily for the external praise, the rewards, the money, the status, or the recognition. Claim your psychological home turf, your desk, your studio, your gym, your meditation cushion through consistent, focused effort.
And cultivate contempt for failure.
Cultivate that profound contempt for failure.
Yeah.
Understand that failure in the territory is just feedback, just data, part of the learning process, not a personal indictment. Your territory is inviolable. It's your sacred space. And it will always, always give back exactly what you put in with integrity and effort. Focus there, not on the hierarchy outside.
Identify resistance, turn pro, connect to the higher realm, work territorially. That's a powerful framework.
It really is. And I think it's important to reiterate, this isn't just a book about writing or painting or composing in a narrow sense. It's truly a potent, concise manual for living a life deeply aligned with your most profound purpose, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
It offers this clear, pragmatic, almost military-grade path to overcoming that relentless internal fiction that keeps so many of us from realizing our true potential. It reminds us with such potent clarity that our unique genius that spark within each of us isn't just for our own benefit. It's a vital gift that we are meant to courageously give to the world. And it emphatically tells us that those unseen forces, that higher intelligence, they are inherently on your side. If only you have the courage to show up, face the fear, and do the work.
The profound truth this book whispers, maybe sometimes shouts right into your soul, is that your creative work, your unique contribution, whatever form it takes, it isn't merely some personal pursuit or a little hobby to do when you have spare time. It is, in fact, as Pressfield frames it, a cosmic imperative.
Heavy, but true in his view.
You were put on this earth with unique gifts, with a specific destiny encoded within you for a reason. Don't cheat us your family, your community, the world of your contribution. Don't let resistance win the war by default. Give us what you've got.
Amen to that.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the war of art. We genuinely hope these insights spark something within you, inspire you to confront your own resistance, and give you the tools and the courage to turn pro in your life's most important calling, whatever that may be for you.
Go fight the good fight.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep into what matters most.